In the beginning was the thought, and thought created a form, and from that came the word thought form. But it is true that everything begins with a thought of some sort. For it is the action of consciousness that gets everything going. This book is about thought. It is about taking the power of human thought and making it do things for you. Not for humanity, but for you. There will be no idealism in this book, no do-goodness. I am not that type of person. What I am going to do here, in this work, is continue what I started years ago, break the monopoly on psionics that existed for so many years and make it available to the general public. And, maybe, break the back of society at large as well. Now, as all of you who have followed my writing over the years know, I do not waste my time, and yours, with stories of people who do psychic things, and then have something totally impossible happen. Like win the lottery because they happen to find $1 million ticket in the street. A $50 ticket, that happens. In fact, it happened to someone. He did nothing psychic at all. He just stepped on a piece of gum and then the gum caught the ticket. But $1 million? I'll believe it when I see it. But psionics does sometimes cause the nearly impossible to happen. In fact, it has saved my neck on more than one occasion. I have a rule. Coincidence does occur, but some coincidences are just too impossible to be that. So what am I going to do for you in this book? This is going to be a very basic text. It is going to teach you how to do basic psychic stuff, like visualization, thought form building, psychic transmission and reception, dowsing with a pendulum, and how to make and use different machines to help you accomplish these things. So I want you to consider some things. The first thing is that there is nothing miraculous or even very mysterious about these powers. Everyone in the world has them and can develop them if they will only take the time. The second thing is, that once you have these powers you can use them for any reason you want. I will place no limits on you. You are absolutely free to make your own decisions with regard to this material and how you will use it. You are your own judge and no one in this world or any other has the right to tell you how you will use your abilities. So what goodies are you going to get from this book? First, the one thing that has at times eluded me, prosperity. Now I know that sounds really stupid, but my money troubles are the result of personal decisions that had nothing to do with psionics and a lot to do with being a terrible procrastinator. And it's always been the psionics that has pulled my rear out of the fire. So I'm going to give you all the information you need so that if you should get into the same sort of messes I get into, you too will escape with a whole skin. Otherwise, as one critic of mine once told me, if you burn your ass, you have to sit on the blisters. I'm going to teach you how to make and use the psionic components, machines and thought forms in combination. That will bring you the things you need, and the people you need. Second, I'm going to give you enough background material that you can strike out on your own and not have to depend upon me. I am going to give you the designs for some really simple gadgets that you can build. There is something to having equipment that you make yourself that cannot be described. When you build your own instruments, you invest an energy into them that no commercial unit can duplicate. And there is another benefit. By building your own units, you get a far better understanding of what is being done with them, and then when you realize that you want to spend the money for the commercial devices, you will be able to get the most out of them. So what does psionics do for you? Can't you do the same things without the machines? Well, there are a few things psionics can do that one cannot do by oneself with no external aid. When I first started writing about this stuff, I was castigated for creating a crutch, among lots of other things. What the poor devils who were upset with me forgot is that when one breaks one's leg, a crutch can be very helpful. Machines exist to save labor. A man can walk across town, and take 3 days to do it, or he can drive his car to the same place in an hour. Don't let anyone deprive you of something useful because it does not fit their scheme of things. In fact, at this point, I should mention something that is unpleasant but must be faced. There are those who profit from ignorance of this material. That is why they worked so hard and so long to keep knowledge of it suppressed. Some do it from misguided and foolish religious motives. They would like you to believe, as they do, that all psychic power comes from the devil and his horned minions. That is probably the most stupid argument ever advanced, and anyone dumb enough to believe it can probably be offered a real good deal on a used bridge. Religion is the province of the weak-minded. Then there are those who feel directly threatened by this knowledge, and in some cases rightly so. A politician is not going to be happy knowing that one person with a radionic box can influence tens of thousands of votes. Finally, there are those unfortunates who must have the universe fit their neat theories, and cannot bear the idea of something going on in it that cannot be taken apart, qualified and quantified. If it does not fit their equations, it cannot exist. Such people are only fit to be ignored. They will always be around, and they are always wrong. In the very early days of the 19th century, when railroads were just being invented, someone predicted that people would travel at the enormous speed of 40 miles per hour. Now remember that the fastest land travel was by horse and they average 8 miles per hour. This was so shocking that a London magazine ridiculed it by saying, it was as likely as putting a man on top of a rocket and shooting him at the moon. There is no arguing with British logic, presupposing of course that you can find it. Now, for those of you who have never read anything by me before, shame on you. Sorry about that, I just couldn't resist it. Anyway, if you're not familiar with me or my work, I'm going to tell you a few basic things about myself. I was not born psychic. I cannot say that when I was 3 I saw the end of the Korean War. I probably didn't even know that a war was going on in Korea or even that such a place existed. I was too busy playing in my backyard with the kids on the block. I got into psychic stuff sort of by accident. I was raised by good, materialist parents who had little use for anything they could not party with. They really enjoyed life, and when I was in college I would come home from a date at 3 in the morning and they would not get back until 2 hours later. And, in spite of the Bible boom of the 1950s, they did not take religion very seriously. We were United Church of Christ, with a short interlude among the liberal Methodists, and when a local television station decided to run the classic Flash Gordon serials on Sunday mornings. Dad was all too happy to give up church-going so I could watch my favorite show, and he could get some sleep. There were no opportunities to see angels in my house, and if anyone did, there were some very serious questions about the quality of the liquor. I was going to be a scientist. I had my chemistry sets and set off bombs in the backyard. They were actually attempts to create rocket fuel. And my telescope and I still have my microscopes packed away in this apartment somewhere. I was going to be a good little nuclear physicist, because that was the glamour job back then. Much more respectable than the corner bookie, and when I was 12 I got this really interesting present, a lie detector. Well, actually it was a very simple galvanic skin response meter in a big, green cabinet, and I discovered that by doing some mental stuff I could make the needle stay on the truth setting no matter what whoppers I made up. I also discovered some interesting things that very few people knew about in early 1962. Such as biofeedback. I hated school. What kid in his or her right mind does not? So I learned to give myself a fever. It was actually really quite simple. I would get the needle to its lowest setting and then start thinking I was in a very hot room. Before you knew it, my body temperature went from a very cool 98.6 to a slightly roasting 99. I would look at Mother, tell her I wasn't well, and she would take my temperature, frown slightly and tell me I wasn't going to school that day. The hard part was spacing the days off so the school nurse wouldn't want to start poking at me. Then, when I was 15, I got my Ouija board. Calm down. Nothing terrible has ever happened because of it. In fact, it is standing next to the wall near me and no demons have ever come roaring out of it, which is a pity because that would be really cool. But it was very useful for finding out which boys were attracted to me, and thus I could save myself a lot of work chasing the ones who weren't interested. When I was 16 I made rocket fuel. Well, I didn't know that. I sort of took up alchemy for the fun of it and got this terrible banging noise which made my chemistry teacher look very serious as he helped clean up the mess. I did not know it. But I had distilled pure ethanol. Pure to the point of being somewhat explosive. Then when I was 17 I got serious about psychic stuff, stopped being a scientist. I flunked math, and got a little book that described the radionic machines in use in Britain. 10 years later, on April 7, 1977, when I built my first radionic unit. I could have kicked myself for not building it 10 years before. but it seemed so outrageous at the time. The purpose of this little exercise in confession is to get you to realize that there is nothing unique about psychic stuff. You may have read tons of books that promised you great powers and how you could get zillions of dollars like Mr. X, but you look at your life and realize it hasn't worked for you. After enough failures, you may be thinking that all this psychic stuff is dumb. Well, I know how it feels to wonder when the check is going to arrive. I also know how it feels to have the impossible happen. And there are times I think that subconsciously, I used to get myself into those messes because of the adrenaline high I would get when I would come out of them winning. When all is said and done, the purpose of developing any power is to gain influence over your life and your environment. Power is nothing more than the means to get things done, and without it you might as well be living in a dumpster somewhere. Psychic power is nothing more than that. Means of accomplishing things, making your life work and making other people live their lives to make yours work better. This book will give you the means to do just that, and I hope it will give you a few laughs along the way.